God, what do you say? But I thought that something that I have is very, very interesting, and I think maybe it'll explain what this is. Can you hear me okay? Good. Once upon a time, a long, long time ago, the eagle and the chicken were very good friends. Everywhere they went, these friends went together. It was not uncommon for people to look up and see the eagle and the chicken flying side by side through the air. How cool that was. One day, while flying, the chicken said to the eagle, "Let's drop down to get a bite to eat, because I'm starved. I've got to have something to eat." "Sounds like a great idea to me," replied the eagle. So the two birds glided down to earth, saw several animals eating, and decided to join them. They landed next to a cow. The cow was very busy eating corn, but noticed that the eagle and chicken were soon sitting on the ground next to her. "Welcome," said the cow. "Help yourself to the corn." Follow that so far? This took the two birds by surprise. They were not accustomed to having other animals share their food quite so readily. "Why are you willing to share your corn with us?" asked the eagle. "Oh, we have plenty to eat here. Mr. Farmer gives us all we want," replied the cow. So the eagle and the chicken jumped in and ate their fill. And when they finished, the chicken asked more about Mr. Farmer. "Well," said the cow, "he grows all our food. We don't have to work at all for it." "You mean," said the chicken, "that Mr. Farmer simply gives you all you want to eat?" Yep, he does. That's right," said the cow. "Not only that, but he gives us shelter over our heads." How cool is that? The chicken and the eagle were shocked. They had never heard of such a thing. They had always had to search for their food and work for shelter. When it came time to leave, the chicken and the eagle began to discuss the situation. "Maybe we should just hang out here and just stay," said the chicken. "We can have all the food we want to eat without working, and that barn over there is sure beats making those nests that we have to make every day. It's awful, it's hard. Besides, I'm getting tired of always having to work for a living." "I don't know about all this," said the eagle. "It sounds too good to be true. I find it hard to believe that one can get something for nothing. Besides, I kind of like flying high and free through the air, and providing food and shelter isn't so bad. In fact, I find it quite challenging." Well, the chicken thought it over and decided to stay there for free food and shelter. But the eagle decided that he loved his freedom too much, gave it up, and he enjoyed the constant challenge of making his own living. So, after saying goodbye to his old friend the chicken, the eagle set out sail for the wild and young. Everything went really well for the chicken. He ate all he wanted, he never worked, he grew fat and lazy, and was very comfortable. Great situation with that chicken. But then one day, he heard the farmer say to his wife that he was yearning for fried chicken. Hearing that, the chicken decided it was time to leave. "I got to check out of here and rejoin my good friend the eagle." But when he attempted to fly, he found that he had grown too fat and lazy. Instead of being able to fly, he could only flutter. So the next day, the farmer's family sat down to chicken dinner. When you give up the challenge of life in the pursuit of ease and security, your ability to fly turns into a flutter. And that's, I guess, the reason eagles fly and chickens flutter. Is this where the world is today? I wonder. I just had to read that. Sorry about that. I want to, so I'm glad you're here. I see other people are coming in, but we're just going to move along. I want to introduce our Bellingham team. Without having a summit like this, you have to have a group of people, wherever it is, that are willing to stand up and work and do things.
Chris wants to know what we want to talk about, and I said we want to talk about the crisis in education in the state of Washington. So, right here in my hot little hands, we put together a 10-point Parents' Bill of Rights statement. Jennifer and I worked on this. Jim Walsh added a couple things, changed a couple things around. Sharon Hannah's going to look at it, and others, and we're going to show him this. So he may use it for fire starter, for his fire. I don't know what he's going to do with it. But these are right on, and we're going to have on the back of this actually code and policy and what the government regulations say, so you can tie into each one of these. It's going to give school board members something to talk about. With that said, how many have ever been to a school board meeting? Oh, where's Paul? Did you see that? Yeah, there. Did you? Wow, I'm amazed. Well, I was a school board director at one time, and I've been to a lot of school board meetings. And so I want to introduce my friend. He called me one day, and I said, Paul, you were no longer my best friend. Don't call me anymore. And Moses was like, don't call me anymore. I don't want to hear from you. What? Because you keep complaining about your granddaughters being in public school, getting indoctrinated, public indoctrination centers. Why don't you run for school board and do something about it? And he's going to tell you the story of what happened. So would you join with me, my good friend, who's done just about everything in life, been a cop, a firefighter, a security guard, you name it, and now he's a school board director, Mr. Paul Hill.
Okay, I'm going to start by apologizing. I am not a public speaker. I have great fear of public speaking. So, with that being said, my name is Paul Hill. I am just almost at 1 year in the school board for the city of Moses Lake, Moses Lake School District. Some early history. I'm the oldest of 5. My mom was a single mom, and through all the years growing up, I never knew we were poor. I never knew that there was an issue. By the time I was in my early teens, I had a drug and alcohol problem. I'm Choctaw Indian by nature, by blood, so to start with, I was predisposed to alcoholism. It's continued through Labor Day of 1983 when I overdosed. I spent 9 days in a coma. When I finally got out of the coma, I was alive, but I lost the ability to keep my train of thought. That's why I have it in my notes, to keep a train of thought and to speak well. I went back 4 days after I came out of the coma, back to my drugs and alcohol. On April 18th of 1984, I called my mom and said, I'm done, I'm ready for treatment, come get me. I spent a month at Minor Recovery Center in Seattle, and I'm proud to say I'm coming up on 39 years clean and sober. From the time that I got clean and sober, I kept asking God, what's my purpose? What do you want from me? What is it I'm supposed to do? And that continued basically unanswered from 1984 to 2006. In 2006, I was led to Raymond. I met Keith. And Keith and Sandy and my wife and I started a Celebrate Recovery program. Certainly a goal and a purpose. Then in 2010, I worked for a gentleman that owned 2 grocery stores. And when I first met Jake and started working for him, we butt heads. We could not get along. But as time went, we fostered a really good relationship. And Jake had a cabin up in Methel River. And I agreed to build a shop for him. Towards the end of this build, Jake was on his step ladder, first step up and holding a little piece of siding. And I just heard this and turned around and he was laying on the ground. He'd had a heart attack. We were 45 minutes away from a town, 25 minutes away from the first ambulance. I started CPR, I was an EMT. I started CPR and did CPR for like 25 minutes waiting for that ambulance. They came, they loaded him up, they got him to the hospital. By the time I got to the hospital, he was sitting in bed talking. They flew him to Wenatchee and put a pacemaker. On the way to Wenatchee, I get a phone call from a gal at church. And she said, Paul, I run every morning. That's my prayer time. And I have no clue what this means, but God said to tell you this was your purpose. Jake lived for another 4 years before he passed away. So I'm just really, really thankful that I got to spend that time, that I was there. That God put me in a place where he wanted me. In 2014, which was a year before I ended my career as a volunteer firefighter. As an EMT and a firefighter, you deal with death and all the negativity. I wanted, more than anything, to be able to deliver a baby. In 2014, I got to deliver a baby in the field. It was a drug baby, but I got to deliver a healthy baby boy. I retired the following year because my physical, my body just couldn't do it anymore. 2016, we moved to Moses Lake. My wife works for the Department of Corrections. So we know we're moving. Okay, I gotta look up churches. There's 38 churches in Moses Lake. Okay, God, I need help. I'm not going to 38 churches to decide where I belong. So the Holy Spirit says, look up Celebrate Recovery. And there was one church that had a Celebrate Recovery program, but it was on hold. So that's where we ended up. That became home. And we started Celebrate Recovery program again. Excuse me. Then in early 2019, I had a chance to excuse me, work on the Wrong Cult campaign. I started as a county coordinator for 5 counties in eastern Washington, and I did the majority of Lauren's security work. Through his campaign, and I spent 15 months with him, he would always talk, we're not going to make change from the top down. We're going to make change from the bottom up. His recommendations, school boards, hospital boards, county commissioners, PUD commissioners, city council, that's where we'll get in and we'll make the change. So it's like, okay, school boards, there's no opening in school. So people started to ask me, why didn't you run for school board? And it's like, no. And I argued with God for 2 months. I am not qualified. I can't speak. I can't do it. I don't know anything. I had stayed out of politics my entire life. So after 2 months, God won and I lost. So to give you a little bit more of my background, and then we'll get into the campaign. I am a retired volunteer firefighter. I spent 41 years as a volunteer. My last 10 was as an EMT as well. I'm a husband, a father, and a grandfather. I am a firm believer in our Constitution. I've taken to date 5 oaths to protect and serve our Constitution. First, in the military. Second, as a King County Sheriff. Third, as a City of Normandy Park police officer. Fourth, when I entered the fire department. And fifth, as a PCO, a precinct committee officer for the Republican Party in my county. I am not, and never have been, a politician. I purposely avoided politics for years. I voted Democrat because that's how my parents had voted. And then about 20 years ago, I realized, oh, there's something wrong with my party. This is not the party that it had been. So I just gave up completely on politics until I got involved with Lauren. So I sat back and I thought, no, somebody else is going to do it. And God kept putting it on my heart. You need to run for school board. I said, no, God, somebody else can do it. There's lots of people out there. Somebody else will do it. Well, after 2 months, I am that somebody. And I challenge you to be that somebody. We need people to step up. And it can be done. If I can do it, and I can win through God, you can too. So. Way too many pages. Okay, my campaign. I did several things. First, I identified why I was running. Next, I identified the core and key issues. At the time that I started, it was, of course, CRT, which has been renamed OEI, Opportunity, Equity, and Inclusion. It's a different name for the same thing. The Comprehensive Sex Ed and a Social Emotional Learning. All key hot points. Next was the academic excellence. I don't know how many people are familiar with schooldigger.com, but I encourage everybody to look up your school district, your schools, and School Digger. And I'll go through Moses Lake, and this was as of 2019. Moses Lake School District ranked 202 out of 245 schools. The high school was 301 out of 418 schools, high schools in the state. Our middle schools, we had 3 out of 517, one was 333rd, the second was 359th, and the third was 514th out of 517. Pretty sad. Our elementaries, mind you, there's 1,136 of them in the state. From top to bottom, we had 224, 734, 813, 820, 831, 843, 969, 990, 998, and a bottom was 1095 out of 1136. Our schools were terrible. So that became one of the really key issues to focus on. How are we going to empower somebody to get the academic excellence up for our kids? So I identified why I was running. I identified the core issues. I knew we needed kids back in school, being at home in front of a computer during the COVID lockdowns is not learning, and it doesn't give them that social interaction that they need. We needed a review board, and we need to return and regain local control. Seems the overwhelming thought in the school system is that Chris Reichdahl and OSBI have total control. That he makes the rules, he makes the laws, he can withhold all your funding. He can't do any of that. There is a small portion of funding that he can withhold, but he cannot withhold the bulk of our state and any of our federal funding. So then what did I do? I had to build a platform, and it was based on accountability, transparency, and integrity. I built a team, and I did signs and handouts. I know Keith was going to pass out one of the handouts that was designed and that I had printed. And yes, that person in the picture on the bottom is me. My campaign decided that I couldn't keep my hair cut the way it was. I kept it cut in honor of my captain, who had been a Marine Corps sniper, and he was killed in the line of duty in a surf rescue. So I wore my hair like that for years in honor of Rob. But they thought I looked like a drill sergeant or a cop. I'm like, well, I was a cop. So, hence, it's a little longer now. Sign waving, huge, huge. We had had a levy fail in the primary due to our bond that had been passed in 2017 wasn't used as it was supposed to be. We didn't get what we voted for and what we were spending our money on. So the voters voted down the levy. So not only did I have my campaign, but I also had the campaign to vote yes on the levy. We need that levy money. It's totally separate from bonds, but people don't understand that. They're not the same thing. And so we had to get the message out to the voters that not only am I asking for your vote, but I'm asking to support the levy. So I started a sign reading, and in the mornings and in the afternoons, I was in front of a school, a different school every day, and a different school morning and afternoon, with my sign and with my vote yes. Before the primary, my team and I would work busy corners. We don't have a whole lot of busy corners in Moses Lake, not like that. We have like 4. So we would work busy corners, and we'd have a group of people waving signs. It was really, really important to get my name out there. And ballot prop for the general, we started door knocking. We passed out these flyers and talked to people. And I asked their vote and their support. So in the primary, I was one of 4 on the ballot. Vicki, my opponent, my primary opponent, was the seated board president. She had 38 years in the school district, and she'd lived her entire life in Moses Lake, or in the general area. I, on the other hand, had no experience in school, no board experience, and I was an outsider. I had moved to Moses Lake 5 years earlier, so I didn't stand a chance. But I did it anyway. So we get to primary, and primary, Vicki ended up with 38% of the vote, and as an outsider, I ended up with 33%, and the balance was split between the other 2, so Vicki and I moved on. So in addition to what we've done, that I talked about already, once it came time for the general, I see high-profile endorsements, and part of them are on the backside of that flyer. The flyer itself was very, very important, I think, in getting a message across to the voters. Most of them didn't understand what the issues were. They knew nothing about CRT. They knew nothing about comprehensive sex ed. And it gave me a chance to speak to people and explain to them exactly what's going on. I got my story. I wrote a bio and a story, and I got it in a local paper. We had every forum or debate that we could get to, we were there. A couple of times we had our own forums and invited other candidates. We surrounded my campaign with influential city leaders, which in a town of Moses Lake is huge. And lastly, I maintained a presence in the community. People began to recognize me, knew what I stood for, and knew what I was going to do. Election night, I expected, when the numbers started to come in, to be behind. I was hoping it would be close, but I knew I would be behind. So the first set of numbers, and I was ahead. It wasn't by much, but I was ahead. Over the course of the night, as the numbers were updated, my lead continued to grow. 2 weeks after the election was the certification, and at that point, the numbers were 68 to 32%. UW did a survey, and in that survey, two of the first 3 questions for the kids: are you alone where you can take this? If not, get a loan. Are you alone now? If not, then it took them out of the survey. Questions 4 through 8, the beginning of it, all dealt with their sexual orientation, what sex they would like to be, and their sexual habits. And this went out to our kids. Of course, comprehensive sex ed and CRT. How many people are familiar with policy 3211 from WASDA? It's a policy to give special rights to the transgender population in the school. It was supposed to be in place last year, and Chris Reichdahl has realized that, Moses Lake, among others, doesn't have this into me yet. They don't have their policy, they haven't adopted it. So we're currently fighting that. It was on this week's agenda. So we're back to fighting. We've got to keep. And of course, I talked about earlier, the difference between the levy and the bond. We're still fighting that issue. We got a high school. The bond was for a second high school. What we got was it's called the Vanguard Academy, and it's a project-based learning. So totally different. So it's not what the voter voted for, it's not what we wanted. So we're still battling that because we've got to pass another bond here soon to replace the existing high school. Most of our schools were built in the early 50s to serve the military base, and they're old. Of course, we dealt with the theft of the superintendent, as well as the gift from the seated board president of a year's base salary, which is $200,000 for him, and a $25,000 bonus. And he was given that instead of being charged. So it's something we have to, as a current board now, have to deal with. Pride flags. Our schools are just covered with pride flags, BLM flags, and apparel. But we can't put a Christian flag up in our schools. The Liberty Caucus handled a case for Camp Constitution, went to the Supreme Court, and the justices ruled 9-0 that that's viewpoint discrimination. So we still don't have a flag policy. Hopefully I can get the superintendent and the board president to put it back on the agenda. But we need a flag policy that either excludes all flags or allows all flags. So my final question, are you that person? Are you willing, or somebody that you know willing, to stand up and take a stand for our kids, for God, and help make a change in our school system? Believe me, if I can do it, any of you can. I had the odds so far stacked against me, but I had God on my side. It was his fight. So I thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to get up and talk.